Alrighty, so week number 4 of the 2022 MLS regular season is upon us, and as usual, I'm going to be doing the preview of these games, and in this video, I'll look at the 11 games that's going to be happening on Saturday, and then tomorrow, I will look at the 3 games that is going to be wrapping up week number 4 of the 2022 MLS regular season. And also, by the way, this is going to be the final week where we're going to have a full slate of MLS action before we do have the international break, and obviously, during the international break, we're still going to have MLS games and, cue all those people that still complain about how MLS still have regular season games during international break when basically no league in the world does that. And I know there's actually going to be like 2 games that's going to be during the international break, so 4 teams are going to be very angry that their game is played during the international break and see players that is not going to be in their roster because they have to be joining their international team. But there's no doubt that when you look at this international break, this is probably the most pivotal international break for the U.S. men's national team in almost 5 years. I mean, this is really it for them to play in these final 3 World Cup qualifying game and to determine whether or not if they're going to be qualifying for Qatar or not, and whether, if they have redeemed themselves from what happened on that disastrous night in Cuba back in 2017. We're going to find the answer of that in April when they do play against Costa Rica in that final World Cup qualifying match. But until then, we do kind of have some relaxation. Well, you'll be relaxed if you're just kind of a neutral in MLS, but I'm pretty sure if you're a fan of your team, you definitely want your team to get another victory to continue a strong start early in the season. And let us actually begin talking about some of these games, and we start off with the matinee games, as we are going to, I think we have 4 matinee games that's going to happen. Or actually, no, we have 5 because we got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 that is going to be matinee game. I mean, if you count, maybe this is a matinee game, which I don't think it is because, it's a 6 p.m. Eastern time. By then, the East Coast is in the evening. But, this time we are going to have more matinee games, and in some way it's kind of spread out in a way where it's not like last week where there was at a time during the meat of the action, which is during the evening time, there was like 8 games that was happening at the same time. Though I think during the meat of the action and during the busy evening period, which is usually like around 7 p.m. Eastern to 9 p.m. Eastern, we're still going to get like 6 games that is going to be happening at the same time. Now, let us actually begin with the first game, which is FC Cincinnati versus Inter Miami, as this game will start at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific time, but the actual kickoff is 1:08 p.m. local time. Cincinnati, of course, fresh off of finally snapping their 14-game losing streak with a win against Orlando City to improve their record to 1-0-2, while for Inter Miami, yeah, it's been a disastrous start for them. And even in a year where they were expected to kind of rebuild, this has been just a really bad start to a season that, doesn't seem like they're going to make progress in terms of the rebuild. And it doesn't help the fact that Phil Neville continued to throw in his player under the bus, and that the team sits 0-1-2 heading into this game. Now, the good news for Miami is that they pretty much dominate this series against FC Cincinnati. I mean, 4-0-0 is the record that they have against FC Cincinnati. They won every single match against Cincinnati, including the last one where they got their biggest margin of victory of 5-1 over Cincinnati. But before that, they go on the road and win 1-0 against Cincinnati. And then they also ruined Cincinnati's first ever home game at TKO Stadium by winning 3-2 in that one. And then in the first ever meeting, Miami was able to win 2-1 against FC Cincinnati. And that was a huge win for Miami too, because that was on decision day, and that they, of course, needed a win to get themselves into the playoffs and into that final 10th spot in the expanded playoffs in the COVID-shortened 2020 regular season. But yeah, like I said, Miami has had a good record in terms of winning against Cincinnati. But that heading into this game, Cincinnati will want to finally get that first win against Miami. And this probably might be the best opportunity to do so because, like I said, Miami is just in an absolute shambles right now. And anytime, again, when your head coach basically throw you under the bus, yeah, that's definitely not a good feeling, and it's definitely not a way to try to gain some locker room morale toward you. But also with the way that Cincinnati finally got that monkey off their back of that 14-game losing streak, and for once, the MLS gods did show some mercy to Cincinnati by giving them a win that they've been waiting for a very long time. Let's see if they can maybe start a little bit of a streak, and especially playing against a relatively weak Miami team. Now, moving on, in terms of the next match, is the rematch of the Eastern Conference Final between NYCFC versus the Philadelphia Union that will also kick off the same time as the game between Cincinnati versus Inter Miami. Now, what's interesting is that this game is actually not on national television, and usually when you have a rematch of the Eastern Conference Final or Western Conference Final, it's usually going to be on national television. Though, I will say that it's kind of good the fact that this game is not on national television, because I know people will always complain whenever if there is an NYCFC home game on national television. People will literally say that, oh, look at that. Look at how once again, NYCFC playing in this five-a-sides pitch, and look at this awful camera angle that they, of course, that they're going to basically have for this game. So in terms of the viewership, I would say that most of the NYCFC home game that's on national television are kind of ranked as some of the lowest as in MLS, and it's for good reason too, because of the way of how bad it is. So, overall, as I said, I think it's kind of for the best that this one wasn't on national television, because that there's going to be a lot of people complaining about why in the world is NYCFC still playing at a baseball stadium and still becoming a team that is virtually like homeless right now with the way that they've been playing in so many different stadiums to start the season, and will continue to do so for the rest of the season. Now, in this game, all-time meeting between both of these teams, NYCFC does have the edge with a 10-2-5 record against the Union, and that include them winning 2-1 against the Union in that Eastern Conference Final to reach MLS Cup. But before that, it was a 1-1 draw between both of these teams. The Union did win 1-0 against NYCFC, but then NYCFC were able to win 2-0 on the road against the Union, though the Union kind of returned the favor and win 1-0 on the road against NYCFC. Also, the record coming into this game, NYCFC 1-1-1, and the Union is 2-1-0. And yeah, this should be a very interesting kind of match. And I know that the Philadelphia Union, they definitely have not forgotten about that Eastern Conference Final, and that they definitely want to have some revenge in this one, and they have a good chance to do so, because they're facing against an NYCFC team that, yes, they did of course make it into the next round of the semifinal against Comunicaciones, but they came so close of going full NYCFC playoff mode, or as I should say, full NYCFC playoff mode, but before what happened this year, when they basically finally rip all the narrative of the fact that they always choke in the playoffs. But now, moving on, in terms of the next match, we got Toronto taking on DC United, as this game will start at 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is 3:08 p.m. local time. All-time meeting between both of these teams. DC has the advantage with a 16-10-11 record, but for TFC, it has not been a great start for their season, 0-1-2, while DC United has a 2-0-1 record. Last 5 head-to-head between both of these games, well, last season meeting, yeah, at least the last 2 has not been close whatsoever, because on that decision meeting, DC was able to win 3-1 on the road against Toronto, and then they put a 7 spot on TFC in kind of a Brazil versus Germany scoreline, winning 7-1 at home against TFC. They did drew 2-2 against DC United. Oh, by the way, that 7-1 loss that DC handed to TFC, that was actually the final game that Chris Armas basically coached that TFC team, and rightfully so, that he, of course, was let go of, because anytime when you lost that badly, and especially during that time when Chris Armas was very disliked from the TFC fan base, that was kind of like the final straw for him to basically be let go of this team, and that of course was the case. But before that, it was a 2-2 draw between both of these teams, and then of course in that 2019 playoffs, it's definitely a memorable moment, at least if you're a Toronto FC fan, and not so if you're a DC fan, because we remember that was the game where it actually ended 1-1 heading into extra time, and somehow TFC absolutely blitzed the DC United in that extra time, scoring 4 unanswered goals to win 5-1 in that extra time. But yeah, we'll see, of course, who will win this one, and especially, again, I think DC will be a slight favorites coming into this game, because for TFC, it has not been a great start under Bob Bradley to start the season, and now the fact that it seems like recently they have officially traded Kemar Lawrence to Minnesota, and I've talked about how I was very interested to see what kind of return TFC is going to get for Kemar Lawrence when they traded him to Minnesota. They got nothing. Like, they basically got absolutely nothing out of that deal, and it just kind of makes me wonder about this move even more. Like, why would you get rid of a guy that, I know he wasn't as good as he was when he was with the Red Bulls, but he's still a decent kind of player, and especially they don't have a lot of depth in terms of the fullback position, and they now got rid of one of their player to get even more thinner in terms of that, in terms of the depth of that back line, and they also basically got nothing out of it. So I want to know what's the motive behind that move. I mean, I heard that maybe the motive is they want to dump the salary of Kamar Lawrence, but I don't think his salary was that big. And again, it's just a move that is kind of puzzled me, though. As a Minnesota fan, thank you TFC in terms of us getting Kamar Lawrence for absolutely nothing and able to kind of help our cause in terms of one of our player unfortunately going into the MLS SABH, which, if you don't know who that player is, watch my News of the Week episode that I made back on Wednesday. But yeah, moving on, we got the Galaxy taking on Orlando City, as this game will be starting at 3:30 p.m. Eastern, 12:30 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is 12:50 p.m. local time, which means at any time when that's the kickoff, it's going to be on Twitter. And indeed, that, of course, is the case. The Galaxy, of course, coming into this game on a 2-0-1 record, while Orlando has a 1-1-1 record. And both of these teams haven't really met each other a lot. This is only the sixth meeting between both of these teams, with the Galaxy holding a slight edge in terms of the wins total. 3 wins, no draw, and two losses against Orlando City. Last 5 head-to-head matchup, the last time both of these teams faced off against each other was back in 2019, and that, of course, is not a surprise, because a lot of these East versus West matchup has had some of these matches that has not happened for a very long time, especially when you have an East Coast team versus a West Coast team. Those matchups usually didn't happen until 2019 because of the whole COVID pandemic we had in the 2020 shortened season, and then also in 2021 when each of these MLS teams only get to play 2 Eastern Conference teams throughout the full season. But before that, the Galaxy had a dramatic 4-3 win against Orlando City before Orlando did win 2-1 against the Galaxy. The Galaxy then won 4-2 against Orlando, and for Orlando, they did win the first ever meeting and kind of win it emphatically, 4-0 against the LA Galaxy in that season. But yeah, for this game, obviously, the Galaxy, they definitely want to bounce back after in that game against Seattle. I thought they were definitely the better team, and unfortunately they kind of got into that classic cliche of being the better team and still come on the losing end. Whereas for Orlando City, I mean, after that embarrassment that they had against FC Cincinnati, that they desperately need a win. Like, I know it's still early days, but anytime when you lose to FC Cincinnati, it's not a good feeling whatsoever. And I know that there are some Orlando fans who have already started to be very concerned, and even some that are downright panicking after that loss against Cincinnati, because this is supposed to be a team that is competing in the top part of the Eastern Conference. And besides that good 2-0 win against Montreal, their previous 2 games, they have not shown like a team that could be a contender in the Eastern Conference. But now moving on to the next match. Speaking of Montreal, they of course will be playing against Atlanta United in this game. And also, by the way, I won't be surprised if CCL team is going to struggle this week, like what we saw back on the opening weekend's action, because with MLS team in CCL, and especially after a gruesome second leg, some of these team might either feel like they're happy that they're moving on, but they're going to have to punt some of these game away because they really put in a lot of resources in that second leg, or you're going to have some team that unfortunately is on the other end, where not only the fact that they are absolutely fatigued, but they must feel very dejected heading into the match on this opening weekend. And Montreal is definitely one of that team. I mean, they played very well in that game against Cruz Azul, definitely gave them all in terms of that game, but they weren't able to come out on the winning side, and now they have to go on the road to play against Atlanta United, who, last game, there was no doubt that Atlanta got lucky against Charlotte FC. I mean, they got a really lucky deflection goal late to improve their record to 2-0-1, while Montreal still searching for their first win of the season and have an 0-3 record. This game will start at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is 4:08 p.m. local time. All-time meeting, Atlanta, of course, leads the all-time meeting with 5 wins, 2 draw, and 2 losses against Montreal. Last 5-10 matchup, it was Montreal winning 2-1 against Atlanta. Before it was a 2-2 draw between both of these teams. Then Atlanta win 1-0 against Montreal before it was a draw between both of these teams. And then Atlanta winning 2-1 against Montreal in the first ever meeting. And again, for Atlanta, they got to take advantage of this, because I know Montreal is definitely going to be up, not really up for this game after what happened on Wednesday, and that, again, this is a good opportunity for Atlanta to get another 3 points and prove that last week that that win that they had against Charlotte wasn't really because of the fact that I would say that they got really lucky, but also just to prove that, this is an Atlanta team that can do some good thing. And even though I know there's already some Atlanta fans that are kind of frustrated with the way how they start the season, I'm kind of surprised that's the case, because I know the goals, of course, has not been there, and that people were predicting that when Pineda does come to this team, this was supposed to be kind of like a Tata Martino kind of team and just kind of dominate everybody. I don't think we're going to see that, and especially I feel like maybe Atlanta fans might need to realize that you're not going to always play that free flowing soccer every time, and that sometimes you need to, of course, grind to get wins, or even maybe have the luck on your side to grind for a win. And they definitely did that in the last game, but we'll see if they can continue in this one against Montreal. But now, moving on, we got the Chicago Fire taking on Sporting KC, and this is actually a really good matchup, because not only the fact that both of these teams used to be in the same conference, Sporting KC used to be in the East before moving to the West a couple years ago, but it's also between two teams that I would say that has some good attacking threat, and especially for the Chicago Fire in the last game, they finally kicked off the Ezra Henriksen era with a win, and really started to kind of look like they have turned the page and turned the narrative that they are an inconsistent team. Though coming into this game, as I said, Chicago have a 1-2-0 record, while Sporting KC have a 1-0-2 record. All-time meeting between both of these teams, 26-12 and 20 in favor of Chicago. Again, both of these teams were in the same conference for a very long time. And this game will start at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is 5:08 p.m. local time. Last 5 head-to-head between both of these teams, it was Sporting KC winning 2-0 against Chicago. Before it was a 2-2 draw between both of these teams. Then Sporting KC winning 1-0 against the Fire, and then they did the same thing in the very next match. And then in the other meeting, they actually had a high-scoring game where Sporting KC was able to come out with a 4-3 win. In fact, before that, I think this was also a game where a lot of people are looking forward to, because of the fact that both of these teams always put some high-scoring display in. We'll see whether or not if this is going to be the case again, and especially for Sporting KC, where they haven't really looked that good to start the season. I mean, the lone win that they had against Houston, I thought that if the Dynamo were maybe a little bit more clinical on the other end and actually take advantage of their chances, this game would have been a whole lot different. And now going on the road against a Fire team that has a lot confident to start the season, especially, you can definitely see these players are definitely playing hard for Ezra Henriksen. I think this is going to be a difficult task, but let's see if they can, of course, maybe get a draw out of this one. But now moving on to the next match. So we got Charlotte FC taking on the New England Revolution. So the good news for the Refs, after them pretty much suffering the most heartbreaking loss in CCL this season against Pumas, and them blowing a 3-0 lead in the first leg and lose in a penalty kick shootout, get to play against an expansion team in Charlotte FC. The bad news, though, it's on the road. And really, I feel like this is a game where, if you're Charlotte, this is a big opportunity for them to make some history. I mean, I know they made history last game of them getting their first ever goal, but really the real history that I know Charlotte fans want to see from this team is to get a victory. And what a way for them to do so against a Revs team that, if I said that Montreal players are very dejected heading into this game after their loss against Cruz Azul, oh boy, I wonder what are going to be the morales in terms of these Revs players. Like, these Revs were, it must absolutely stung them with the way that they, of course, lost that 3-0 advantage they had against Pumas in the first leg and lose in a PK shootout. And that, in some way, it's kind of almost similar to what we saw with the Colorado Rapids against Comunicaciones, where the Rapids also lose a PK shootout to Comunicaciones, despite in that game, I would say the Rapids didn't really kind of blow it because they didn't actually have the lead heading into the Ankets, but to lose it in the PK shootout, it was a very devastating factor, especially they were heavy favorites of beating Comunicaciones in that first round matchup, and it was no surprise that a couple of days later, after suffering that PK shootout loss, they came into the game against LAFC and looked completely flat. And I just feel like this is going to be the same case for the refs in this one, and that for Charlotte, they got to take advantage of it, and not only take advantage of it, but also not making some history in their home stadium, which, by the way, I know that from what I heard, it's not going to be 75,000 again. I mean, pretty much for the rest of the season, Charlotte will cap their capacity, I think, like 38,000, because they're only opening their lower bowl for the rest of the season, which, by the way, that lower bowl was actually really big. Like, when you can fit 38,000 people in that lower bowl, it's definitely a big stadium, though. From what I've also heard with the amount of tickets that's been sold, it's not looking good. Like, it looked like that stadium could be half empty, even with the reduced capacity. And it's understandable, because I know Charlotte fans, I do think that I don't want to say Charlotte fans are kind of just jumping off the bandwagon so quickly after watching these free games. I think they know that their first year is going to be really tough, but it doesn't help the fact that I can tell that there's already a lot of casual fans for the Charlotte team that maybe have already jumped off the bandwagon because of the way that they have been having a lot of problem heading into the season. And also, it doesn't help when your head coach basically openly say yourself you're screwed heading into the beginning of the year, and that they also have no attacking threat and look like a team that is completely not ready for life in MLS. It's understandable why maybe some fans might be turning away from them, but let's just hope it is still just going to be a decent crowd, and a decent crowd enough to potentially see their team win their first ever game against a still very shell-shocked New England Revolution side. But now, moving on, in terms of the next match, is none other than the Blues Knot Derby. So this, of course, is the first of two Blues Knot Derby of this season. The latter one, of course, will be happening in October. In fact, that actually is going to be the last home game that the Quakes are going to be playing this season against Minnesota. And something tells me I'll definitely wear a Loons jersey during that last home game that the Quakes has, because I have a feeling the Quakes are pretty much going to be out of the playoffs from them. And yes, I know it's still early in the season, but when you look at the situation that the Quakes are in, like, I think between them and Inter Miami, the situation looks doom and gloom right now from straight off the get-go. I mean, and the last game kind of proven too, in that 2-0 loss against the Union. I mean, if you don't pay attention to the score and actually watch that game, you would see that the Union should have won that game like 5 or 6-0 against the Quakes. Like, the Quakes basically did nothing in that game against the Union, and it doesn't help that the next game that they have to face is against a team that is Minnesota United, a team that, of course, won on the road against the Red Bulls, and I heard Dane Sinclair is going to be starting in this game, which rightfully so. I mean, it's pretty clear that it would be kind of dumb for Adrian Heath to decide to hit the keys back to Tyler Miller, especially after the performance that Dane Sinclair had against the New York Red Bulls. But there's no doubt that I think for this Minnesota team, I mean, I feel like they have looked impressive to start the season, though I will say that they still haven't tapped to their potential yet. I think they still have so much potential to be a team that could be a dominant team in the Western Conference, and that's definitely good to see, because that's one of the thing that I was concerned heading into the season, of whether or not if they can live up to their potential. And even though in some way they haven't done that, I can see that they could potentially break through. And a great way to break through that potential is put up a big number in this game against the Quakes. And yes, if you wonder who I'm going to be supporting more in this Blues Knot Derby, it's got to be the Loons. I mean, I'm even wearing the jersey in this preview because, again, I expect them to get an easy win in this game against the Quakes. But also, I kind of want Minnesota to really destroy the Quakes in this one, because I think this will maybe start to pressure the front office of the Quakes to really do something, because you can clearly see that Almeida is sabotaging this team every way possible, and that I've even said it before. I won't be surprised Almeida might be out of this team before we even hit the middle part of the season, because you could just see his mind is not there, and the players have already stopped playing for him with some of these crazy formation, or just playing players out of position when it's clearly that is not the case. But looking at this game also, besides kind of what I give a brief description coming into this one. This game, of course, will start at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is 7:08 p.m. local time. All-time meeting between both of these teams. What's interesting about the Blues Not Derby is that, in the early days, the Quakes actually dominate Minnesota, and how they won their first four games in terms of that, and then the switch basically was flipped, because then Minnesota, of course, won 4 straight, and now all of a sudden we have 2 straight draw in terms of this meeting. So are we going to head to a point where we're going to have 2 more draw before things, of course, can turn around? Hopefully that, of course, is not the case, because, as I said, I really want Minnesota to win this one, and that this should be one of the easiest win that they could get at home in this one. Now, the last 5 head-to-head between both of these teams, it was a 1-1 draw between both of these teams, a 2-2 draw between both of these teams, before Minnesota absolutely destroyed the Quakes in that MLS's back tournament quarterfinal match 4-1. Before, it was a 5-2 win that the Quakes had against Minnesota. I was at that game, and I remember that was the game where, it was pouring down, and if you're a Quakes fan, it basically feel like you basically are kind of summarize the weather of that game, which is, it's just a depressing kind of game that they play against the Loons in that one. But then in the prior meeting, Minnesota also went 3-1 against the Quakes. So yeah, let's see who, of course, will win this Blues Not Derby. Hopefully Minnesota, because of all the things that, of course, have said. But that being said, let us now switch sports and look at the last 3 games that is going to be happening in terms of the Saturday action of week number 4. So moving on, we got FC Dallas taking on the Portland Timbers, which will start at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is 7:38 p.m. local time. Dallas, of course, have a 1-1 record to start the season, while the Timbers have a 1-2-0 record to start the season. All-time meeting between both of these teams, Portland does lead the all-time meeting slightly with 12 wins, 7 losses, and 12 wins, 7 draw, and 10 losses against FC Dallas. Last 5 head-to-head meeting, it was the Timbers winning 1-0 against FC Dallas, but then Dallas won 4-1 at home against the Portland Timbers, before it was a 1-1 draw between both of these teams, and then the Timbers winning 1-0 against FC Dallas, before Dallas did win 2-1 against the Portland Timbers. And overall, Dallas has had a good record against the Timbers whenever this game is taking place at Toyota Park, and not to mention the fact that, so far at the beginning of this season under Nico Estevez, it's been kind of successful, especially with some of their signings has really paid off, and especially their biggest signing in Alan Velasco. What a superior debut that he has. I mean, I don't expect him to kind of be like that every single week, but with the debut that he has, I mean, Dallas fans definitely have a right to be very, very excited about him and this team going forward. And not to mention the fact that this is also a Dallas team that I mentioned. This is a team that knows how to beat good opponent. Like, it's kind of weird to see, and I would say they know how to beat good opponent when they're, of course, playing at home. On the road, it's a different story, because we know Dallas is a team that tends to struggle on the road. But when they play at home against a good team, they always find ways to get all 3 points. And against the Timbers side that, are looking to try to get their second win, I don't think this is going to be an easy win for the Timbers, and that they need to, of course, dig deep so that they can get all 3 points in this one. But now moving on, in terms of the next match, we talk about the other Texas team, that is the Houston Dynamo. And don't worry, Austin fans, I get to talk about your team tomorrow when they do be on national television once again. But first, we will talk about the 2 Texas team, and that, of course, I already talked about Dallas. Now we're going to talk about the Houston Dynamo taking on the Colorado Rapids, which the kickoff will be the same as the one between Dallas and the Portland Timbers. The Dynamo, of course, have a 1-0-2 record, and fresh off their first win of the season against the Vancouver Whitecaps, while the Colorado Rapids are starting to look like the Colorado Rapids, and specifically the Robin Fraser Rapids that we know from last season, that surprisingly finished first in the Western Conference. All-time meeting between both of these teams, Colorado does have a slight advantage in terms of that 15, 10, and 12 record. But in terms of the last 5 head-to-head, it has not been close whatsoever. I mean, it's been a total dominance that the Rapids has had against the Dynamo, both home and away. They won 1-0 on the road against Houston in the last match before winning 3-1 against Houston in the last match. And then they win 3-1 at home against the Dynamo, 2-1 on the road against the Dynamo, and then it was a 1-1 draw between both of these teams. So, yeah, again, then this is a game that the Rapids are going to be favorites coming into this one. But, you know, for the Houston Dynamo, and especially for Paulo Nakamura, you know, their last game, you definitely saw the brilliance of Darwin Quintero, and that, you know, I think that game that Quintero has played definitely was one of his best game with the Dynamo. But we'll see whether or not if that can show up again. Because one thing I know about Darwin Quintero, especially during his time with Minnesota, is that, you know, especially during his latter part of the career, he could sometimes be very, very streaky too. And now that he do face against a Rapids team that has a much better defense compared to the Whitecaps and much more organized, it's going to be interesting to see how he's going to do. But now moving on into the last game of the Saturday action, we wrapped up with RSL taking on Nashville SC, and you know, both of these teams definitely getting off to a good start. Though for RSL, it's actually an unexpected good start to start the season, because they are start the season with a 2-1-0, fresh off of an incredible comeback against New England in the last match in the snow. While Nashville, of course, they did suffer their first loss of the season, and only their 5th loss in the past 2 seasons against FC Dallas. This game will start at 9:30 p.m. Eastern, 6:30 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff is 7:38 p.m. local time. All-time meeting, this only is a second meeting between both of these teams, with the only meeting last season was a 0-0 draw between both of these teams, and something tells me it could happen once again, because you know about Nashville and that they want to play for 0-0 or maybe get that 1-0 win on the road. You know that they're going to try to do it the same case in this one, but it's not going to be easy, because again, this RSL team, you know, when you look at this team, it feels like this team is still in the mode that they were in the playoffs, and it's quite shocking the fact that I'm seeing that they're still in that form that they were in the playoffs that made them go all the way to the Western Conference Final. Because time and time in the game, I've seen teams that have a Cinderella run in the playoffs, but it doesn't usually means that is something we could see happening in the next season, and that's just not been the case. Like, that last game against New England was a very kind of RSL performance that reminds me of them making the run to the Western Conference Final last season. And you know, if they can of course get a win against Nashville, I think people need to start paying attention to RSL, and really will say that they're probably the most surprising team heading into this season, because again, not a lot of people predicted that they would actually make it to the playoffs. I certainly didn't predict them to make it to the playoffs, and right now they're definitely proving a lot of doubters, including myself, wrong. But you know, it's not going to be easy, because you know Nashville wants to bounce back in this game. Though I will say that for Nashville, you know, since this is the 4th road game of their long 8-game road trip to start the season before they play in their new stadium, this is where fatigue will start to come, and this is also kind of where it will really start to test the character of this Nashville team and this Gary Smith team, of them being on the road pretty much every single week. Do they have the tenacity and the mental toughness to of course go on the road once again and at least get a point out of that? And something tells me they could definitely do so, because you know, this team is definitely well coached under Gary Smith, and it still is a team that I do believe there's a reason why they only lost 4 games last season. Like, this is a team that play well both at home and on the road, and that they don't lose a lot of games, because it's really almost impossible to trying to break down this Nashville defense. I mean, in the last game, Dallas was able to do so, but not until late in the game, and even then, it was just a mistake from that Nashville team on the defense to give up a penalty, and then Alan Velasco decided to turn into Messi for a second to score that second goal. So yeah, let's see if Nashville can of course bounce back in this game against RSL. But that being said, let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this video, as that is pretty much it in terms of previewing all games that's going to be happening tomorrow as part of week number 4 of the 2022 MLS regular season. And yeah, hope you guys enjoy this video. If you do, make sure you guys like, smash the subscribe button, and as I said, let me know in the comments below what's your prediction for all 11 of these games. And yeah, hope you guys enjoy this video, and I will see you guys next time.